In this video, I want to go through the book, The Pathless Path. It's a book that I read on my Kindle, and I want to talk through some of the things that are in that book and how it applies to the life of graduate students and PhDs or masters, specifically those that don't really feel like the current options are really a good option for them. I will have a link to this book down in the description below if you're interested in reading the whole book. Today I'm going to go over 5 main lessons that I think apply really well to graduate students and academics, PhDs, and there are 5 other main lessons in the book that I'm not going to go over. So if you are interested in reading it, that's definitely worth a good read. The Pathless Path is essentially a book that talks about how there is kind of a default path. And so for a lot of us, that default path was you go through school, you graduate, you go to college, and then you go to graduate school. And after graduate school, kind of your default paths are either you go get a professorship, you get a postdoc and then get a professorship, or you go into industry. And even the going into industry when you're in grad school doesn't even feel like the default path. The default path really feels like you either need to go get a professorship or a postdoc after you graduate grad school. And so the Pathless Path is really talking about going against the default path and how to really find the path that really makes sense for you in your work and your life and what you really want. So the very first lesson is to question the default. So especially when you are in grad school, you're probably kind of talked to, and the default path kind of becomes you're going to go get a professorship or a postdoc. You work really hard through your master's or your PhD, and then you kind of go one of those 2 routes. And the biggest thing initially to do, if that doesn't really sit right with you, is just to question the default. The reality is that when you have a graduate degree and research skills, there are a lot of different paths that are open to you. And just because one is one that's primarily talked about doesn't mean it's the right one for you to pursue. And so I think it's good that we have more people, going into industry, but even then it's kind of like, especially if you're a scientist, like you're a chemist like me, you either become a chemistry professor or you go and become like a chemist within industry. And I rejected kind of both of those default paths. I'm currently a data scientist. I have a video on how I became a data scientist if you're interested in that. But that wasn't a path or a default path when I was in my chemistry PhD. So I think it's really important to question, what is the default? Does that really fit me? And then what else is really out there that I could explore? And there are so many ways that you can use your skills that you're developing in your PhD, even if your path doesn't really look like it. For example, on this channel, this is really entrepreneurship. This is a business. And I'm using the skills that I developed in my PhD and beyond to be able to help other people going through the same system. Even though it doesn't look like the default path of a professorship, I'm doing similar mentoring that happens in a professorship. The second biggest lesson, and this is something I really wish that I had done when I was in my PhD, is to reflect. I think when you have this default path in your head, okay, I'm just gonna go through all these steps, it's really easy to just keep working towards something instead of really questioning whether that's what you want. And so an important part in this stage, especially when you are in kind of a terminal stage, there is an endpoint to graduate school if you're in graduate school right now, or even if you're in this stage where you're just not really happy in your current position, if you've already graduated and you kind of want to see what else is out there, it's a really good idea to reflect on what really makes you happy, what do you really want to do, and things like that. For me, I knew when I was in undergrad that I hated lab work. Honestly, I might have even known in high school because I did a lot of labs in high school and I never really liked it. In undergrad, I hated all my lab classes, and then even in grad school, that was the part that I disliked the most, was actually doing the lab work associated with chemistry. And if I had reflected and just given myself the freedom, I think I would have pursued a very, very different path that may have allowed me to get where I am now a lot sooner. Now, I did develop a lot of skills during that time, and I don't really regret the choices that I made, but I think reflecting earlier on into being very self-aware of what do you really want and what do you really enjoy is important. I think there's been a lot of studies done that have basically showed that a lot of people go for positions because of title and not really because they're going to enjoy the work. And most of us maybe don't even think about how much of the work that you're doing are you actually going to enjoy. But that is where most people are fulfilled and happy in their jobs, is when they enjoy about at least 80% of the work that they're doing. So if you are really about being a professor, but you hate teaching, then you may want to start reconsidering that route. Is there a different route where you can use your same skills, but you're going to enjoy a lot more of the actual day-to-day work that you're going to be doing within that position? The third lesson I want to talk about is what they call make a friend. And this is essentially networking, finding people that are on paths that you're considering and talking with them, figuring out what was their journey to the path, but also figuring out what is their daily life like. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm not going to really encourage everyone to go start hitting up people for informational interviews, but that is one way to pursue this. And I think that it could be a really great way, but with me, I'm autistic. I couldn't imagine really reaching out to tons of people for informational interviews, and I actually didn't do any informational interviews when I decided to switch into becoming a data scientist. However, I think there's a lot broader ways to do this now. And one of these things is the prevalence of social media. So you can look up day in the life videos on YouTube or Instagram or any kind of social media platform and really see, now obviously this isn't going to be everything that happens in their day, but you can kind of see what are the things that they are doing. And you can read books from people that have chosen to go into your path or a similar path that you may want to go into. Being able to look from these different creators or even talking to specific people can really give you a good understanding of the paths that you might choose to take. You can also feel supported in these paths, right? It's the social connection that we want to make. If you can connect with somebody else socially, even if they don't know about the connection that you're making, it can be really helpful in order to move forward on a path that really makes the most sense for you. The fourth lesson is to experiment. And in the book, what he talks about is prototyping, but essentially if you're interested in certain paths, start experimenting with those paths before you decide to drastically change or anything like that. And he even talks about a lot of people who make these drastic decisions that we see. So like people who are big-time lawyers that quit their job to become content creators or other things. We see this as one big decision, but in reality, it was a lot of experimenting that led them to this conclusion of this is the path that's going to make me the most happy. Experimenting is really something I've done a lot, and I think if you are a PhD or if you are in grad school, I think you really should be dedicating some of your time to experimenting with different things to really figure out what path you want to pursue later. So for example, for me, when I was in my PhD, I started learning Python, even though that wasn't something that my lab was working with at the time. I started learning that and creating apps to be able to analyze my data. So that was a way of prototyping where I knew, oh, I actually really enjoy this, and that could have led to me pursuing data science later on. Another thing I also did in graduate school is I wrote a book. So I was about halfway through writing my dissertation, and I decided that I didn't just want to write my dissertation, so I also wrote a book. It's called Becoming a Responsible Student, and it's mainly like geared towards undergrads, but it's basically a lot of just advice for how to take responsibility for your own learning as a student. And that is actually, it was self-published on Amazon, and yeah. So that was a way with me experimenting with creating content, which is something that I now do a lot on this channel. The other benefit of this is as you're experimenting, you're going to gain more and more skills that is going to allow you to be a better value whenever you try to look for another position or job, or even if you decide to do something more entrepreneurial, you're going to have these mix of all these different skills now. Now, not only am I someone who has a chemistry PhD, but I'm also someone who knows Python, who knows how to write. Now I have more skills to be able to market myself better when I am finally trying to go down my path that I want to pursue. Then the final lesson that I think is really important is being patient. One of the quotes in the book is, searching for the right path in life is important, even if it requires multiple attempts. For me, when I went into data scientist, I actually went through 2 rounds of interviewing for a data scientist job. So within 1 round, I got close, but I wasn't able to get an offer. And I got an offer for a remote chemist position that I took, even though I knew that wasn't my end goal. It was a contract position that was 6 months long. So during that 6 months, I, re-identified what I wanted to do, redecided I wanted to do data science, and then redeveloped all of my applications, developed more skills to then go through a 2nd round of applications in order to finally be able to land in the job that I'm currently in. So if I had just decided after that 1st round, I obviously didn't get it, that wasn't the path for me, I'm just going to move on and not consider data science anymore, that would have been a mistake, because all I needed to do was go out there again and try again to be able to move into the path that I'm currently in. This is also really similar whenever you're talking about like content creation. It takes a really long time to build up something on content creation. If you don't know, I've been publishing videos for over 3 years and I have 16,000 subscribers, which is amazing, and I'm really excited that I've been able to grow this much. But you have to realize that this has been 3 years of me working basically every week to produce a video for you guys. There really hasn't been a lot of feedback coming the other way until earlier this year when it finally started building. So I really had to be patient and had to keep producing and trying to figure this out while I wasn't getting, really great things right away. So being patient when trying to figure out your path, I think, is also really important, which is where a lot of that experimenting comes in as well. I've also been talking a lot about, like, if you're someone in grad school, figuring out what you're going to do after. But if you're someone in grad school that's like, I don't really know if this grad school thing is for me, I don't really know if I really like any of this, I would really encourage you to start experimenting while you're in grad school. And not for what you're going to do after, but you can start applying to jobs while you're in grad school. And if you get a job before you graduate that you're like, well, that's a lot better than me continuing grad school, then take it. If you're not really liking grad school currently, you can do a lot of experimentation to really determine what path you want to pursue in this moment, but be patient with it in that don't just decide, okay, I don't like grad school, I'm gonna leave, and I don't know what I'm going to do next. Like, sometimes that may be the right decision, but try and have some patience with figuring out what really is your next step, what it really is your path along the route to being able to live the life that you want to live. So I really hope that this was helpful. If you're someone who is struggling with, I don't know what I want to do once I graduate, or I don't know if I'm on the right path right now in my PhD, I really recommend reading The Pathless Path. I think it's a good book overall, just to kind of help you realize that there's other options and deal with some of the fears that come from those other options. If you want to get some more career advice, I will leave a few videos up here. One's on how to find jobs on LinkedIn, and the other one are other YouTube channels that really knock it out of the park with career advice for PhDs. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.